I don't know, Dave. That's a difficult question. I think maybe if we go back to just a basic framework that we talked about earlier about models that potentially are dangerous, and we talked about, is the model opaque and not transparent? Does it have the possibility to scale and potentially be used by large amounts of people? And is the harm or potential damage that the model causes pretty substantive or substantial? And I think in the example of like a home loan, that definitely applies to all three.
Yeah.
Banks definitely will not open up their AI model or decision-making model to tell you how—
Not willingly,
how they made a decision. So that would be quite rare. Secondly, the scalability of this is quite large. So you can imagine some of the largest banks in the world with thousands or hundreds of thousands of clients, the impact or the scalability would be quite large.
Yeah.
And then lastly, for each of those individual customers, the impact on their life could be huge.
Yeah.
The difference between having a home and not having a home. What could be more fundamental to a person's well-being or idea of psychological kind of stability than the opportunity when they're ready to purchase a home? So these are really fundamental things that I think we have to think about. Now, going back to the idea of recourse and the balance of, do we trust the human, even though we have bias, or do we touch the AI, even though that also has some level of bias? I think it's a bit of a mix, and I think we need both. I don't think we can completely do away with the human element and rely completely on the AI, but we can't go the other way, overboard the other way either. And I think in our seeking of efficiency of how we use AI, one of the ways we, one of the big draws is that it will hopefully make us more efficient, right? Some of the repetitive tasks and things that take up a lot of our time, maybe we won't have to do those anymore. But in our pursuit of this greater efficiency, I do think we still need to sacrifice a little of efficiency to keep a human element there. So when we go back to that example of, do you have any recourse? Well, what would be great is if banks continue to have somebody there that a rejected applicant could go to and say, hey, I got rejected, I just want to understand why. And then you could have somebody there to explain the process and potentially follow up to see if things were interpreted incorrectly.
Yeah.
I think that would be the best of both worlds. Now, of course, not a lot of organizations may be willing to do that, but I think there will be organizations that will be willing to do that, particularly as we have these debates about how to balance this responsibility and this trust between the different stakeholders involved.
Yeah, and you say that banks or financial institutions wouldn't willingly allow people to see their algorithm or other kind of inside data. I completely agree that they wouldn't willingly do that. But I wonder if transparency really is the key to ensuring these things, and they do say sunlight is the best cure from an ethics perspective. I wonder if that is the eventual future of this. If we're going to rely so heavily on these products, if we're going to rely so heavily from a financial entire industry perspective, I wonder if the eventual step would be just like a patent, where you're granted a patent, but in return you have to provide very public data on the creation and various components of that particular device. I wonder if that means that eventually, if you hit these three things, if it's not transparent, if it's really scalable, and if the potential for harm is very significant, I wonder if there would be either a public or even kind of private governmental disclosure required to show that there isn't bias within the system.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point. And from a broader level, some people are talking about this, right, in the context of large technology companies that have grown so much and become such a part of our lives.
Yeah.
And maybe those companies shouldn't just be considered just a normal company because they're so influential, but maybe we should regulate them like a financial company or even a public utility.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Yeah. And so I think that's part of the broader debate we're having as a society to understand how we want to manage the influence, the increasing influence of these companies in our lives.
Okay, so that's something to think about from the standpoint of AI and artificial intelligence. As these things become more and more ubiquitous and utilized around us all the time, is to think about how are they making life more transparent, more efficient, and more unbiased, or are they actually entrenching existing biases and therefore kind of further distancing certain segments of society from the financial markets and from financial inclusion?